Okay, welcome everyone. Call tonight's regular council meeting to order. Recommendation that the agenda for the regular council meeting of October 3rd, 2022 be adopted as amended with the addition of item 5C, permissive tax exemption bylaw number 3501-2022, and to change the order of the agenda from 4C to A. We'll switch those positions. Moved by Councillor Randhawa, seconded by Councillor 80. All's in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. Item 3A, recommendation that the minutes of the special council meeting of September 20th, 2022 be adopted. Moved by Councillor Cunningham, second by Councillor Niche. All's in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. Item 3B, recommendation that the minutes of the regular council meeting of September 2022 be adopted. Moved by Councillor Cunningham, second by Councillor Niche. All's in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. And item 3C, recommendation of the minutes of the committee of the whole meeting of September 20th, 2022 be adopted. Moved by Councillor Randhawa, seconded by Councillor 80. All's in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. So first up, we have a resolution to consider tonight, framework for reconciliation policy document. This has been a framework that's been worked on behind the scenes for quite some time. This is in addition to the MOUs that we've signed with Metlakatla, Lacmalams, and Kakatla. This is more of a citywide policy of what we want to do in terms of reconciliation. And so we have Clarence Nelson here with us this evening, hereditary chief of Metlakatla. Traditional name is Nistoy. And I'd like to maybe call Clarence forward to the microphone and maybe do a traditional welcome and maybe speaking to what this would mean for council to be passing a framework for reconciliation in the city of Prince Rupert. If you're willing to come forward and chat to us about it tonight. Yep.
As long as I don't push the wrong button. Good evening, everyone. And again, it's an honor to come and stand before council to learn a little more about this framework agreement. My friend, he had to leave suddenly, and he didn't leave me the paperwork, so I didn't get a chance to read it. But I'm sure it's everyone here understands it. First of all, I'll introduce myself. My given name is Clarence Nelson. It's my given name. My traditional name is Nistoy. Nistoy means some grandfather handshake. And I come from the tribe with the Gitwal George people. Gitwal George means we're people of the Kelp. And for thousands of years, this was our territory right here. We have a lot of history around the harbor, along with the other 8 tribes of Lacmalams and Metlakatla. My ancestor village is right where the port is. And the north phase of the port, where I'm not sure how many of you would remember Wall Shipyard. Right where Wall Shipyard was, that's where my ancestor village was. And that was the last place they had a war with the Tlinkits. Defeated the Tlinkits, and Axe was the chief thing. He came out of kayaks. Axe, those of you remember Jimmy Bryant. Do you remember Jimmy Bryant? He was a hereditary chief. He passed away a few years ago. He's the last one to carry that name. Mm. So we have a lot of history around the harbor, with the 9 tribes, the 2 communities. And I've lived in Rupert here for 60 years tomorrow. Since we've been married, my wife and I, our anniversary tomorrow was 60 years. So, I've seen a lot of changes and a lot of things happen, and there's no end of change. Another generation comes, like what's coming up now. That's going to kind of provides good leadership. We've got a lot of young, educated people, and I'll be glad to see them be part of leadership down the road. And anyway, of course, around our harbor was the 9 tribes through Metlakatla Pass, and we had another village there in Metlakatla Pass called Metlakatla, really. But before Metlakatla, it was called Hunam Galzep, and the chief there was Sasa. So he was another Gisparwada, a Killarwell chief. So we had 1 village over Metlakatla, 2 villages here, and we had another village, Kayaks. So each tribe had 4 crests, and within the 4 crests, each leader would have their own village. So we had one of our villages at Lucy Island. It was called the Lachibu tribe, and they had a big village on Lucy Island we called Lachspana. That was the historical name, and that goes back 9,000 years. That's a long time. Dr. Martindale, they did the testing out there with archaeologists, and that was their findings. One of that goes back 9,000 years. So, we do have that history in the north coast, around the harbor, through Metlakatla Pass, and all the way to Lac Whillams. We did spend time at Lac Whillams, our ancestors. After Duncan came, and when Duncan came, then he moved from Simpson 1862 to Metlakatla, and built a beautiful village. It had 1,200 people, had schools, had a girls' school, a boys' school, an industrial school for men to learn to be carpenters, to build boats, to build rowboats, to build homes, and it had some beautiful homes. And the biggest church is west of Chicago. It's got 1,200 people.
Wow.
So we have a lot of history around, and I love old history, and that's part of what I do now as I get older. Hey, I'm going to be 82 next week, so I'm not getting any younger. So, history is very important to me, and for me to pass it on to my children and other children within the nation, so they'll learn who we are and where we're from and where the 9 tribes were and how they're connected and whatnot. And it's fantastic history. And my wife also does. She teaches our language, Somalia. So she mentors to young people that are going to become teachers in our language. She mentors them, and they finally complete their mentoring and they become a teacher, which is really good to see. We thought that was going to be a difficult task to bring our language back, but it's coming slowly. So anyway, to Lee Bryan, the mayor here, council, thank you for the opportunity for me to come and talk to you. And my friend on there, I'm glad your relative had a good, successful operation and everything's going well. That's important to know, and it eases the worry of family and relatives when we hear somebody's having a major surgery. And we've been through a lot the last few years. With this pandemic and COVID, you name it, everything has happened, and it all affects everybody, regardless who we are. But like I say, I've been here 60 years tomorrow in Rupert here, and I've seen a lot of changes and I'm sure there'll also be more changes down the road. But it's good to see our young people like Reed here, reach your education, be part of the leadership here, and it'll encourage future generations to become leaders. And like I'm retired now, but I'm supposed to be retired, but I work with my grandson. He bought a 50-foot boat, and he finished university, and he charters it out, and we've been focusing on youth this summer, taking youth around the territory, show them where our harvestship camp is and what we harvest, how we harvest out at Triple Island, Stevens Island, Dundas, Melville, all around there. We take youth and talk to them about how important all these areas are. In Lac Whillams, they're building harvesting camps, big homes where people could go stay a month if they have to, harvest all the resources they need, prepare for the coming winter, and feed other family members, feed friends. And I think it's good because a lot of young people don't have that opportunity nowadays. Their parents are probably gone. They don't have anybody in the family that's got a boat to take them out. And we'd be taking them out with my grandson, 50-foot boat, and having a great time with them. So I think, I take my hat off to Port Simpson where they're getting involved that way and get involved with youth, the teachers, and they know where to get the funding to develop these programs. So it's all interesting programs. So back to this Reed's document here. We've always been talking about everything that's happened over the years now, reconciliation. And where they're talking about it with the residential school. That's all about reconciliation. But I think years ago we used to have a tribal council, and we're all one nation of these, regardless of where we came from. Kitkatla, Hartley Bay, where they're Kitkatla, Lac Whillams, Kitashu, and we're all under the tribal Kitchilas, Kitchupalem. We're all under the tribal council, and we had good unity, But of course, times changed, and all the other communities, they wanted a little bit more of the money of the action, where the money came from. They said, well, we got a bigger band than you guys. You know, we need a little more money. And that broke up. You know, and we lost the tribal council. And I think there's a big loss for our nation. Well, now with this reconciliation thing, maybe it'll start bringing our people back together and realizing and focused on things that are important for each community and the nation, the young people, especially young people. Things like that we could focus on and bring them around and encourage them how important education is. You know, my grandson, I've been with this summer. He was 8 years old when he started with me on the boat. He used to take him out on the boat, you know, go fishing, Kitimat, going all over the coast. I fished the whole coast, and teach in the area. And now on his deckhand, he's got the skipper's taking down the bigger than mine. And now he said, Papa, you know, you got to come with me. You'll be the storyteller and whatnot. So we're having a great time together here, just sharing what we've been through together in life. How, you know, I was teaching him, and now he's teaching me. And he has a 150-ton ticket. He runs the Port Simpson ferry. And when he's not doing that, he's teaching navigation. So he's a busy boy. You know, he's going to be a good leader and things like that. I just, you know, enjoy being part of. You know, as I get older, I say, well, you know, even if I become just a storyteller, you know, to teach young people about our history and what happened within our history and whatnot. You know, and as I look back and see a lot of my friends go that I've been with for years, especially the co-op. You know, the co-op was one of the bigger employees here for years after the mill. You know, we had 600 members in the co-op. We had every category of fishing, for the seiner and halibut, gillnet and trolling, just jigging. We had all that. We had all different nationalities. But here's their thoughts. These elders that formed the co-op. You know, when they were on the beach at Langara, they said, you know, we need a financial institute. We've got to have it. If we're going to borrow money, where are we going to borrow money to build a co-op and have funding to buy our boats? So they formed a credit union. There's a co-op fisherman that sat on the beach that said, well, we have to form an organization that we could acquire our finances. And of course, they said we need an insurance company. So they formed Pacific Coast Mutual Marine Insurance Company so they could insure all their boats. And of course, they said we need stores to buy our supplies. You know? So they formed a co-op store at a gas station. And my job then was towing camps. I was just over 20 years. I was there all my life. I started in 1960, the co-op. And, you know, it was quite a membership then, you know, how they worked together and built it and everything. And my job was to tow scows up and down the coast to Vancouver Island, around the Charlottes, and down the Rivers Inlet. The scows are the fish camps. We moor there, and we take fish from fishermen during the day. So, you know, that's how I think of it. As I get older, I said, you know, I really, you know, kind of proud of those old timers and how they developed a business, you know, that was part of Rupert for a long time, you know. And of course, we still have the credit union here, you know, whatnot. But there's more than the credit union. There's everything that's associated with business. So, you know, I just wanted to share that history with new members here who may not have been here, you know, around, or learn how this place developed from, you know, First Nations community into a city. And I was just reading last night about some history of how the cannery started, you know. In 1893, 12,000 Chinese migrated to the Fraser River, the Skeena and everything. They used them for labor. Then, of course, there's the next bunch came were the Norwegians. And, of course, then the Japanese came, 4,000 came, and they were top fishermen. So we all lived together in the canneries, you know, and there's about, between 50 and 100 canneries on the North Coast years ago. So fishing the industry was a pretty important thing years ago. And, you know, too bad the way it's gone now. You know, we're pretty fortunate to have the port now. You know, that's creating the jobs and giving the people the opportunity to own their own home and purchase their own home and stay here. But it's so, like I say, I'll close in this part here because I'm really not familiar with the whole presentation you made. Mr. Morgan, and I didn't get a chance to read it, but I'm sure these guys have reviewed it, and and I hope that it's accepted and whatnot, and because we have to look at how we're going to all work together, really, regardless who we are, and we still have people from the 9 tribes that live in Rupert. In fact, we have probably a big percentage of First Nations people that are in Rupert. We still have probably between 45 and 50%. When I first came here, moved to Rupert in 1960, well, 60 years tomorrow, you could buy a house for, I paid $20,000 for a house then. What are people paying now? $500,000 for a house, hey? And that's a lot of money to dish out. But those are, part of the changes, and, the changes will continue to come and go. And I'd like to wish to Mr. Brain, all the best in future years. He isn't running again. I appreciate your hard work and working with council and trying to make the best of everything in Rupert and make changes if you have to make changes. There's always something to change, and
forever.
Yeah, and I think we're fortunate to have now what I see with our bands. Our bands are starting to pull together a little better now and spend their money. Imagine how much money our bands are spending in Rupert here right now. They're spending a lot of money. Our band, we got that complex for senior complex. That was $17 million. And we've got the gas station. And other bands have bought buildings that are going to rebuild them to make the town look better. So I think we're doing a lot to help the improvement of our city. So thank you for your service and the time you spent with council, and to the councilmen, and those of you running again. The best of luck to you, and I hope it's all for the better down the road. And as we maybe review again your proposal there, Reed. So thank you, Reed, for asking me to come down to support your presentation, and thank you all for listening to my words. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nistoy. Now, I'm not sure Councillor Skelton Morgan could have wrote you all that.
Yes.
So Veronica Stewart, our communications manager, is going to come and present the framework, and then council will have a discussion about it. But Nistoy, if you feel like there's any additional comments after we're completed, just let me know, raise your hand, and you can come back if you want to speak to the content as well. I'd be happy to have you commented as well, so no problems on that. So we'll let Ms. Stewart outline the framework, and then we'll ask council to have a discussion and take it away.
Sure. So staff's recommendation is that council consider adoption of the attached policy framework and direct staff to begin actioning on items within the framework. So just a little bit of context for the way that this information is presented. It's really intended to be kind of a living document with some basic direction to staff to proceed on different items. So some of those items include, working with an employment equity policy, kind of entrenching more visual and cultural identity in Prince Rupert. So opportunities like having parks renamed after Indigenous people where they're just currently named after the street that they're on, or if we're opening new subdivisions, to have those be considered for Indigenous names. Other items within the policy framework are looking towards supporting Indigenous First Nations, like we have with things like the MOU, in actioning on shared objectives like housing and economic development. So that's another thing. So that's something that we're just looking at kind of cementing into a council policy. And yeah, I think that's the main things that it touches on. If anybody would like me to speak to anything else within the document, please feel free. But our thought was we wanted this to be a living document, and it also recommends that council develop a committee of people from the community to help us forward in these objectives, because we understand that it's not necessarily the best place for staff to be forwarding this kind of information, and it really also needs to be community driven. These are just some opportunities that we identified for us to proceed as a city with reconciliation. And if anyone else would like to speak to it.
Great. Well, why don't we if anyone wants to move the recommendation on the floor into a discussion.
I'll move it.
Moved by Councillor Scott Morvin, seconded by Councillor 80.
And
Councillor
can I
Scott
jump
Morvin, I'll give you the opportunity to comment first, okay?
Yes, sounds good. Yeah, can everyone hear me on there?
Yep.
Yeah, as Sonoyget Nastoy had mentioned, I had to take off, unfortunately, very suddenly this weekend, just for context sake. My cousin, who grew up, myself and my brother, kind of like a third sibling of ours, was going through a double lung transplant. So I'm actually patching in from Vancouver General Hospital right now. So at this point, the surgery was successful, and he seems to be doing well. So the family has just kind of departed, and I am now loitering in the Vancouver General Hospital cafeteria. So patching in from there. So it's nice to see the family doing better, and then folks are hopeful, and it's good to hear that he's in good health. But I apologize to Chief Nastoy for having to depart so suddenly. We had a meeting at Java on the Saturday, I believe, and had a nice little chat and kind of went through the framework. But as you mentioned, it would have been nice to have a physical copy, and I was going to relay a physical copy to him, but unfortunately I had to take off suddenly that just shortly after that. So, just to kind of speak to some of these pieces, for me, I look at this framework policy as building a foundation, and the foundation of a house that then can become something else in the future. And it being a living, breathing document, it gives the opportunity for it to grow and evolve as relationships do. And then that's relationships with each other, relationships between nations. For me, especially as we're creeping up to an election and all of those other pieces, it's important to lay the framework and the standards for these and how we're going to do this as a municipality moving forward. As Veronica Stewart had mentioned, regarding some of the pieces, so around housing, cooperation around developments, as well as shared prosperity agreements, building on existing MOUs, and continuing to evolve and enhance those policies as they unfold. For me, I look at this again as like, when it comes to reconciliation between the Western world and then Indigenous ways of being, we have a wall in between us right here. And that wall is a barrier of hostility between traumas and experiences that kind of have happened kind of throughout history. There's a rift in between on both sides, and that's the fear and apprehension that we have to be able to take down these bricks. And a lot of the times that's where it prevents us from having a relationship and having a connection. So I look at this policy as us taking bricks down bit by bit in collaboration with our neighbors and our families and friends, and finding a way forward together in a good way. And I think that that's really important. So for me, being able to move this motion, work collaboratively with our communications manager and one of our city planners as well, and kind of tag teaming this effort together. And I think it was really important to kind of lay this framework so that we continue to build on it. And ultimately, I also look at it as opening the door and allowing this to have future discussion and building on it in that process. And I guess when it comes to the committee, it doesn't have to be a humongous time commitment, be something that we can meet with different leaders as they approach, and have different pieces that kind of come in. And as folks want to come in and continue to build on this and what's existing thus far, I think it's really important to have those conversations, because consultation is key and consent is key. So for us to continue to evolve in a good way and hear, and I've been bestowed with a variety of different wisdoms over my life, but I think one of them that really landed with me is that we have 2 ears and one mouth for a reason. And I think that we should definitely be listening a lot more than we are preaching or talking. And I think that there's an opportunity to have these dialogues and have these conversations, and that this framework itself allows for that in the first place, and also sets the standard for future policy that also even includes some language pieces and signage around some of the ways of wayfinding around the community and the traditional territory of the Tsimshian. And for me, looking at this and what this would look like, as well as a territory acknowledgement at the beginning of council meetings, and that being kind of foresight, and here on out from when we call a meeting to order, we are to acknowledge the traditional territory of the Tsimshian people, or the Tsimshian nation, and also home to many diverse Indigenous peoples, because we have many people from many nations, and Kane as itself was a gathering place long before it was a port city. So before this was all trendy and these things were happening, variety of different nations gathered here and traded, and there was a variety of different things, and there was also the raids and the wars, as Chief Nastoy had spoken to as well. But I look at those pieces and just how do we find ways to build that and also acknowledge the diversity of our community. And as Sonoyget Nastoy had mentioned as well, that speaking from a unified front as one nation, as a Tsimshian nation, rather than speaking to one village or over another, and finding a way forward together as one.
Thank you, Councillor. And thanks for your work on this file. I know you and Ms. Stewart have been working closely on that. I'll open up to Council. Councillor 80.
I want to start with a brief personal history. When I arrived at the age of 23 on the dock in Kitkatla, as a young teacher with a suitcase and a couple of guitars and an amplifier, knowing absolutely nothing at all, really, about the culture and where I'd arrived at. And the very first person that I remember speaking to on the dock was mending nets was Russell Gamble. And we had a wonderful conversation, and I want to say that I've carried with me the welcome that the people of Kitkatla gave me for the rest of my time here. And it shapes how I feel about where we've arrived, because I know how far we've come. So I'm very supportive of this. I do want to pick out a number of things that kind of stood out for me, maybe a little more specific. I want to touch on the notion that it's a work in progress. The term was iterative. I'm an English teacher, and I actually went and looked it up. But thank you for that, because I learned something today. It means a work in progress. It means a living document. And I think that's really important aspect to this, because it is a very complex and multifaceted set of ideas and issues. And so it has to be a work in progress, because you can't grasp it all in one moment. But I also think that it's valuable because it gives a future council, the next council, a guide for future action. And it provides some flexibility in terms of how the next council can continue to develop it along with First Nations people, mindful of emerging opportunities and challenges as time goes by. I also noted that it's supported by a wide range of other institutions, federal and provincial governments, the United Nations, federal and provincial municipal organizations. This is part of a very big, very broad change in the way we are approaching these issues. And I think it's really important that we be a part of that. I noted that under the purpose section, it says, and I'm quoting here, there remains an opportunity to entrench these actions and also to take actions that will have a broader impact and visibility to residents. And I think that's important because some of what's been done in previously is really important, but it doesn't have that visible, this is who we are as a community face to it. And I think it's really important to start to build that. And we do that through the symbolic visual things of street names and so on, and in any other ways that we can do so. I think it's really important. Section 2.1, it says, and again quoting, the truth and reconciliation principle that the preservation, revitalization, and strengthening of Indigenous languages and cultures are best managed by Indigenous peoples and communities. And I really support that emphasis. I see the role of city council here, or municipal government, as supportive and collaborative, but not necessarily the central architect. I think that has to be the Indigenous peoples themselves. I really think that that's an important concept. So the short version of that is I'm very much in support of this. I'm really excited to see where it goes. I think it reflects how far we've come since I was a young man on the dock in 1983. And I think obviously there is still a ways to go. But it's part of a very encouraging history.
Other comments? Councillor Naish.
It's hard to follow what you two have said, so I'm going to keep it very, very simple. To me, the big part of this is it is a living document, and it is something that will always be worked on and always be hopefully gaining traction and moving forward. And that's really what it's all about for me, is moving forward and trying to make things better. And I'll just keep it to that.
Well, I support this document 100%. It brings some meaning to the word reconciliation. That's been bantered around for quite a while. A lot of people talk about it, but don't do anything about it. The city here is actually putting some action into the words. It's, it comes, as Councillor Adey said, from different agencies right up to the UN. But I think it's great the city is doing this. It's giving us a framework to actually do something about reconciliation. And like the chief said, it's bringing the bands together as well as the city. We've all got to work together if we want this region to prosper. And this is going to be a step in that direction. We're going to be taking that step with a lot of other partners, and I think that's very important. And I think it's like you say, a living document, but something like this can't be put in stone. It's got to be something that's mobile, and it's going to be changed quite a bit in the future. I'm quite sure there's going to be different opinions come out in that, but I think we've got something to refer back to and really work together on.
Councillor Randhawa.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I'm in support of this document. It's a great way to start, and thank you, your hard work and Councillor Reed's hard work. It's great. It's a great way to start. I am in full support of this one. Thank you.
Eastoy, do you want to add anything to tonight's comments at all? You're welcome to.
I just wanted to made me think, I go back 2001. There was no document such as this to make negotiations any better. And there's negotiations with Booth High School when it was rebuilt. Of course, all the teachers said, we want to keep the name Booth because he was a hero. He saved a young person from being run over by a milk truck, delivering milk. So we said, well, we got a lot of heroes too amongst our First Nations. Why do you want the same name? We want a First Nation name on that school. We fought for 1 week. We finally got the best of it, called West Ham. That's what it's called now, West Ham. Because all the teachers, everybody wanted to keep the Booth name. So that one instance, where we finally got a name change and it got part of our traditional pan is, what do we call pan? When you go down the waterfront on a stormy day and you see the water, foam forms on the water from the wind, that's pan. You have to foam on the water from the storm, And water, that's pan. So we called it the last pan. Well, Pan was another village where I come from. My ancestral village was on the fort. Number two, another little story. 12 years ago, the college, they contracted photo pole out to Carberry, and they never came to my tribe, people else, it's our territory. We had an idea what we wanted. We only wanted 4 crests on there. 4 crests of our tribe. Every tribe had 4 crests. Some couple tribes had 3. So we met and fought for a week. But we would not let that pole go up. We said, you got to follow protocol. It's protocol here. We want that pole up, but, you guys still didn't have to follow protocol and come to us and share your thoughts and ask us what we thought of it until it came down to the last minute when we finally had to say, that pole's not going up. So this framework agreement, it'll help things like this make better decisions on development. That's all I wanted to add to that.
Thank you very much. That's a great story. Do you have any words to say? Okay. I'll just say.
Oh yeah, go. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no.
I was just gonna jump in. Yeah.
We've been working closely with the First Nations communities on specific agreements with each community. We have our agreements with Kikala. We're building the waterfront project together, a $30 million project. We have agreements with Lac Melange, with Metlakatla, and as well as both of them together, the Coast Shen. And we have a variety of frameworks under that on housing, on land agreements, on social agreements. And so what I think this is even broader and more entrenched citywide policies that will raise the cultural profile of the entire community. One of the conversations that I've been having for the last 8 years is with all the bands in the area is creating a Tsimshian kind of mecca out of Prince Rupert, that this place should reflect the culture that has been here for thousands of years. And so, I dream in the future that you walk down the street and you see, street names, or you see signage, or you see cultural art, or you see longhouses, and you see that culture just integrated into the community, which has a variety of benefits. not just in terms of recognition, but tourism, all kinds of things. I just see nothing but positive things coming from a framework like this that takes it to the next level, which is the entrenchment of the culture embedded into the community, and just that recognition that yeah, we are 50% First Nations in this community, and we all living here together. And we started that process with the rebranding of the city, right? We went through that process. We rebranded the community. We have new symbology that reflects the true nature of this community, City of Rainbows. And I think this is just the next step in that process. And I think it's something that, over the next decade will continue to be expanded upon, continue to be refined. And it's just nothing but positive energy around something like that. So that's why I'm definitely in support of the motion. Councillor Scott Mormon, sounded like you had something else to add.
Yeah, for me, I just want to close off with, some of the pieces and notes that I've kind of spoken to in the past. And when it comes to reconciliation, and for me, reconciliation by definition is to either restore friendly relations or make one view compatible with another, which is kind of an Oxford way of saying we'll get along. So for me, I look beyond this, and what that looks like beyond reconciliation is taking steps forward together, walking alongside one another in relationship. And I think that that's really important, and allowing for new fiscal relationships and new relationships when it comes to collective prosperity and all of those other things, and finding our ways to walk together as one. And I think that that's really important. And for me, I just want to acknowledge Soy for coming and speaking as one of my tribal leaders and members of my nation and my community, and just coming in and being able to put this in motion, and the honor that I have as an Indigenous person in an urban government to be able to put something like this forward and see it through.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor? Anyone opposed? Okay, motion's carried unanimously. And before we move on, Nistoy, would you be willing to do a quick photo with council right here? Yeah, let's do it. Sorry, councillor. We'll try to get you in the background.
Yeah, over on the screen. Yeah, Rosa, if you're able to pin me, so on the screen there. I just look a little. I think I look a little taller on the screen, actually.
Let me tell you, KJ's gonna tell us how to take this picture.
We can actually read if we line up here in front of this one,
Yeah.
and then maybe Chief could sit in the chair. Mayor, maybe you could sit next to the Chief in the chair.
Yeah, we'll sit in these two. How about that?
I need more right around this way. Blair, would you like to sit in the chair? This is my boss. Come forward. And then we need to leave a hole there for Reed. Is there any way City West can zoom in on him, or somebody can? Do you have a technician?
Blow up his space?
Yeah, blow up his face. No, we don't. Okay, all right.
Well, if you pin it on the Zoom screen, like on the laptop, it'll zoom in.
Can we just move this microphone? And that black box doesn't move, right?
Yeah. Is my face larger, or am I a tiny little square behind you? I'm in your thoughts. Yeah, as a conscience. Yeah. There it is.
Oh, there's a good read. Look at that.
Oh.
Gurvinder, could you come this way? You can give me 1, 2, 3. Thank you. Okay. Ready? Look at me. Actually, could we move these 2 chairs? Sorry.
I was waiting for this part of the meeting.
Where does it serve?
Right up off. These ones there. Sorry.
Look at me rearranging.
Let's just get rid of this.
What was that?
So let's just get rid of this whole thing.
Okay. Okay, everybody look at me. Gurvinder, move this way just a little bit. Perfect. Ready? 1, 2, 3, and big smile. Yay. And again. Oh. One mic. Oh, there we go. And perfect. Thank you so much.
Excellent. Thank you. Well, thank you so much for coming.
You bet you like you and you're very proud of that job. Well, counselors, hey, yeah, nice. Thanks for giving me the opportunity.
I'll let you know too. You can go home now too. You don't have to stay for the rest.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll come back one of those.
Sorry, it's like noon. Thank you so much, guys, for coming.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Clarence.
Okay, next up, we have a temporary use permit application 2203 for 191 Matlakatla Road. Recommendation of council proceed with approval. Did you want to speak to this first, Ms. Miller?
No, I was just going to let you know that you have a resolution prior to this.
Did we
These-
not pass that?
No.
I thought we did. Did we not actually?
With respect to
reconciliation
4B.
agreement?
No, the next one. The one that was 4A. You moved 4C to 4A and then moved A down to B.
Oh, sorry. I thought I just switched them places, A to C. Okay, so then we're on the send the letter to the Premier and Cabinet. Okay.
Correct. Thank you.
Okay, so the recommendation is that council authorize the mayor to send a letter to the Premier and Cabinet members requesting immediate action on providing funding and new restored revenues to enable the city of Prince Rupert to respond to our critical infrastructure renewals as soon as possible. Moved by Councillor 80, seconded by Councillor Randhawa. I'll just quickly speak to this. I mean, the wording could probably be more specific, but we can include it in the letter. Essentially, this is referred to the Port Property Tax Act. What is clear is we have issues at the Ministry of Finance level on interpreting their own reports. Clearly, the reports that they have generated on the Port Property Tax Act articulate some of the challenges and some of the solutions that have been presented around how to solve the Port Property Tax Act. And it seems that there needs to be a little bit more encouragement at the provincial level. I'm not sure if the rest of the cabinet feel the same as the Ministry of Finance on this issue. And so I think what's appropriate now is we actually have the cabinet come together and make a decision on the Port Property Tax Act specifically. I think that is the problem is so complex, but also should not be left to just one ministry given the impact it has on a community like ours. The fact that we lose revenue every year from it. There was a recent statement that was put out by Ministry of Finance saying that we were compensated for the Port Property Tax Act, which is not necessarily true. We receive a stipend, but it does not keep up with depreciation, which means we still have to make up for the tax loss on residents and small businesses. And a variety of data has already been provided. Reports have already been provided. Reports have been generated to the provincial government that absolutely show that there's pretty much no argument remaining for the Port Property Tax Act to remain in place, given the unintended consequences of its lasting beyond its temporary use. So what this would be is requesting that the Premier and Cabinet make a decision on that and consider a decision on it. And also in the letter, we would outline some of our immediate infrastructure needs because we are at reaching critical failure on some of our infrastructure. We all see McBride, and we're looking at issues like that happening all over the community. We have a 100-year-old water system, distribution system within the town site, and it needs immediate replacement, or we could be facing longer-term consequences. And we need every tool under our belt to collect as much resources as possible. And we need to be able to charge accordingly with these industries that are here, particularly the ones that are classified marine export industry, a variety of other challenges like that. So we need to make sure it's very clear, and I think council needs to send this letter off and authorize a letter like that to raise it up the chain so that we can get some of the traction that we need to come to a real resolution on this issue. Do we move and second this? We did, right? Yeah, so it's already in. Any comments? Okay. All's in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. Next item, temporary use permit. Did you want to speak to that?
No, I have not received any comments in writing with respect to the temporary use permit.
Okay. So recommendation of council proceed with approval for temporary use permit application number 2203. Moved by Councillor Cunningham, second by Councillor Niche. Discussion?
I have apologies if this is a stupid question, but so the way that I read this application, so it's to dismantle boat that's been declared a problem, but then we've put a restriction around hazardous materials. So if they were to encounter hazardous materials in the dismantling process, what happens then?
Dr. Buchan, would you like to answer that?
Thank you very much through to Councillor Moreau. The first effort is that they are supposed to do due diligence to make sure that they remove any hazardous materials on the shipwrecks before they're brought into the city. So that's an expectation and a condition laid out in the permit. If there was hazardous materials that were brought on that they were not aware of, then it would be incumbent upon them to properly contain and remove them. And I think that in that unforeseen eventuality, it would make sense to add that as an additional condition in this permit, this draft permit, to make sure that there's just no uncertainty about what they need to do. So I would suggest that we add that as an additional condition for clarity.
Who is mover and seconder on this one? Can't remember. Friendly amendment to add that as to the motion. Okay. Okay. So then we'll add that to the motion. Go ahead.
Okay. To Councillor Moreau's point, who's going to monitor this?
If you would like me to respond, Mr. Mayor?
Yes, absolutely.
The city doesn't have any processes for monitoring it. If we were to be made aware, we would respond accordingly. But we don't have a process to go out and monitor businesses as they conduct business. However, having said that, if sometimes if things happen, we do hear about it and we would respond accordingly.
Yeah, I'm just a little concerned that they're supposed to remove all the hazardous materials on site where the boat's floating right now and then bring it on land. And if they come across some hazardous materials, well, let's just do it and get it done with. So I think there should be somebody monitoring at some point. I'm pretty sure there's going to be some inspection done by either the Coast Guard or Transport Canada before that vessel's towed around and brought on land. It's just these were questions we asked last time this came up, and we did a big cleanup on the Watson Island site, and I know most of the hydrocarbons have been removed from this vessel already, so by the Coast Guard, but I'm quite sure there's still asbestos and other things there, and in some of the places in this vessel, it's almost impossible to get to all the hazardous materials until you start breaking it up. It's just the way the ships are built. So, my only concern is how it's going to be identified and who's going to be monitoring.
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, go ahead.
You can speak a little bit more to this. The Ministry of Environment has rules and regulations around handling hazardous materials, and we would expect that they would intervene in the event that they also found out about it, or hazardous materials were discovered and not properly treated. The property owner ultimately is responsible, and the way that the provincial scheme is set up is that the ultimate responsibility falls to the owner. What we're trying to do here is to put some additional flags and signs along the way and steps along the way to minimize the eventuality or the prospect of any hazardous materials actually showing up and causing harm.
One other point, now that this is all going to be cut up and put on a barge and head south, I'm wondering if we could talk to the shipbreaker about. We always seem to have trouble transporting derelict vehicles that we collect down south because it's expensive. And I'm wondering if we could talk to the shipbreaker about actually loading some of those vehicles that we collect during the year to go back on the barge at the same time, because they're just going to be scrap metal.
Is that a question for?
I think that's a question for you, Mr. Buchan.
Okay. No, thank you. That is not the proposal that's on hand. What we're looking at is for a temporary use permit. If Councillor Cunningham is asking staff to take the initiative to find out who the shipper is to see if we can move derelict or scrap vehicles down south. We could do that. It's not currently in our work plans, but we could certainly look at doing that. I don't think that it needs to be tied to this application. We could reach out to people that barge, materials and see if there is a way to move them. But that could be a involved process. Who's going to receive them on the down south? There's a lot of questions and processes involved in following through on a full process to actually get rid of old vehicles.
Yeah, I think he's more inquiring as a side tangent to maybe take a look and if there's economies of scale there, type of thing. If not,
if there's an opportunity, we'll look for it.
That's what I think he's saying there.
Okay.
Other comments? Okay, we had made an amendment to the original motion. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. Next, we have a report from planning regarding the Prince Rupert Low Carbon Resilience Climate Action Plan. Mr. Bucket, are you speaking to this, or who's speaking to this?
I am not speaking to this. Is there other staff that are prepared to speak to it? I thought present, perhaps Ms. Stewart is available.
I can speak to this.
Thank you.
Thank you. So the purpose of this report is for Council to authorize the Planning Department to proceed with the funding application for the Prince Rupert Low Carbon Resilience Climate Action Plan project to the Disaster Risk Reduction Climate Adaptation Fund through UBCM. This project will build on climate commitments in the City of Prince Rupert's 2021 Official Community Plan, which specifically identifies the objective to develop a plan for climate change adaptation. The climate crisis is recognized as a significant and pressing issue that has more significant social and environmental impacts every year. While Prince Rupert is not viewed as vulnerable to impacts such as forest fires or heat domes, other climate change vulnerabilities such as sea level rising, flooding, tsunami, and landslides have become more and more likely as the climate change continues. Additionally, with senior government's shift to low carbon frameworks, the city should ensure growth accommodates and capitalizes on changing energy, technological and land use paradigms so that we are investing sustainably rather than in short-term projects that provide short-lived returns or require replacement in the short term. Staff is recommending support of this grant application by fully supporting the Low Carbon Resilience Climate Action Plan and to direct staff to allocate time for overall project, including management and project management.
Great. Anyone want to move the recommendation? Moved by Councillor 80, second by Councillor Randhawa. Discussion? Councillor 80?
Yeah, I'm in support of this. I've felt that this issue is of critical importance. I've felt this way for a long time, so I'm really pleased to see a practical step on the horizon in terms of moving us in the right direction on the climate change initiative. I'm also encouraged by the fact that it allows us to develop this this initiative in a way that supports the other things that we're trying to deal with. I think it will create some cohesion between a number of different things that we're working on. I did have a couple of questions. Under the background section, it says that the LCR has been adopted as a framework for climate action by many communities across the province and country. I'm not necessarily looking for an answer now, but I'm hoping that at some point we could have an overview of what some of those initiatives in other communities have consisted of, because I think that will inform what we end up doing anyway. The second question I have is around the deadline and the costs. I see that the application was submitted in time to meet a September 30th deadline, and I checked my phone and I think we're on October 3rd today. So I guess I'm asking, is it safe to assume that the step we're taking here, which is to endorse this application, is acceptable to the recipient of the application in terms of the timing?
Yes, thank you, Councillor. Often the applications for funding such as this can be accepted pending a resolution from council. So they accept the application and then hold it pending the resolution, and then they'll proceed with it. So it will meet the deadline.
Okay, thanks.
Other comments? Go ahead.
Most of our heavy industry isn't under our control. It's under the port's control. And I know they're working towards the same goal we are. But I think that it's something we should look at as a cooperation for low carbon from the port as well, because they're the ones that have the most of the heavy industry on their sites. And we have no control of that. So we can bring in a lot of different frameworks and that, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be followed by port corporations or that.
Yeah, and I think what this will do is create a process where we can have that kind of engagement, not just with them, but with the entire community. And, under the OCP, that's part of the actions of the OCP. This then would kick off to get to the funding levels, because there's so many aspects to this: local food production, local energy production, electrification of the fleet, net zero buildings, and the new step code that's going to be implemented, where all buildings have to have zero emissions coming 2030. There's a variety of things that have to happen. So all of that, though, has to be within cost considerations, right? We've got waste treatment solution that we're moving forward with the pilot project for the natural capital solution, which would be heavily reduce emissions for this community if we were to go with a more mechanical solution. We would probably have a lot more oil and gas dependency on that, where here we're going to use nature to treat waste. If that's successful, these are the types of things we're doing. You have the dam. We purposely raised the dam higher. Council elected to do that for the future potential of electric generation of that dam. That would produce renewable energy for the community. Could also be a revenue generator for the community. These are, how do you, double down on infrastructure replacement, but also meeting climate goals. This then would take it to the next step, where we need to do a full, robust engagement and costing and all that kind of stuff. This will probably be a few-year process for sure, but it needs to get moving. And if we get funding for it, then it's not taxpayers paying for the process, which is great. Any other comments?
The one thing is, like, when you look at the economic and social co-benefits of this, everyone thinks of it's just an environmental situation, but there's actually other aspects of this that are going to enhance the quality of life in this community, and even in some situations might even improve our tax situation. So it's something that, there's very broad spectrum of involved in this.
Any other comments? Okay, all those in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. Next, we have bylaws, report from our Chief Financial Officer regarding the Digby Island Ferry and Prince Rupert Air Ground Transportation System. So there's a recommendation that Council get first, second, third readings to see Prince Rupert Digby Island Ferry and Prince Rupert Air Ground Transportation System tariffs, fees, and charges amendment, bylaw number 3503/2022. Do you want to speak to this first?
Thank you. The bylaw amendment before council provides clarity of the fee structure for charter services provided outside of regular hours. Given the fee schedule, it remained unchanged for 10 years. Staff have added fee increases of 3% for each of the next 4 years for all classes except aircraft passenger bus fares and monthly passes for passenger vehicles. Those two classes remain unchanged. to continue to encourage the use of the local airport for commercial air travel.
Anyone want to move the recommendation? Moved by Councillor Ady, seconded by Councillor Cunningham. Any discussion? All's in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. Next, we have recommendation that council give fourth and final reading to the police detachment temporary borrowing bylaw number 3502/2022. Moved by Councillor Moreau, seconded by Councillor Ranhawa. Further discussion? All's in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. And lastly, we have a recommendation that council give fourth and final reading to the permissive tax exemption bylaw number 3501/2022. Moved by Councillor Ady, seconded by Councillor Moreau. Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. Any reports, questions, or inquiries from members of council? Okay. The last thing I will say is there's an election coming up on October 15th. Good luck to all the incumbents and all the new people running. And we have one more council meeting as this council on October 24th. And then the new swearing in of the new council will be November 7th at 7 p.m. At this chamber. And tomorrow is advanced polling. First opportunity to vote. 5th
Wednesday.
on Wednesday. Councillor Moreau. No, it's okay. I should have known too. On Wednesday, and then also on the Wednesday the 12th, as well as the general election day of October 15th.
Through the mayor to everyone, since it's being brought up, this is a reminder that the advanced polling will be held at the Recreation Complex at the Raven Youth Lounge, not at City Hall as it has been in previous elections.
Good to know. We should put that out on social media to remind people, because I've had lots of people say we're coming to City Hall on the Wednesday. Okay, other than that, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn. Moved by Councillor Ranhawa, seconded by Councillor Ady. All those in favor? Meeting's adjourned.